Fan Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to That Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, and I'm joined, as always, by David Rios.
How you doing?
And Jose Fuentes is out for the night, so hopefully he'll be back with us next week. So it'll be the two of us holding down the fort for now, and we'll see how long we can vamp for. But it should be an interesting show. It's even talking about a genre that neither of us have really worked in, but that heavily impacted the comics industry and is in part responsible for the Silver Age of comics, which is, of course, the namesake for Silverline. So a little bit of hyperbole in the title, but we'll be talking essentially about how something as benign as romance comics not only saved the industry from going bankrupt, but also changed the course of many creative choices. But before we get into that, David, let's break the ice. This last week, what have you been reading, watching, playing?
Reading just some of the weekly books, and here and there some of the X books. Watching a couple things with the Acolyte. A couple episodes with that, and surprisingly catching up on some of the Blacklist.
Okay, dang, yeah.
I don't know. I love James Spader in it. I think I've been hooked for a while, so it's like I'm finally catching up on season 10.
Yeah, he is really good in it, but it's also just one of those shows where when you hear about how long it's been going on, you're like, damn.
I still at this point don't know. Is he Keen's biological father or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was so back and forth. And no games, unfortunately.
Okay.
But lots of work otherwise.
There you go. That's good. Yeah, I've been meaning to start the Acolyte because I love the director for it. So I'm interested to see how they do. a kung fu Star Wars series.
Yeah, I see a lot of it's ironic because you got Carrie-Anne Moss in it, so they do kind of play a little bit on the Matrix, some of the fight stuff like that you can see in the previews and all that stuff. Not spoiler free, but yeah, it's it's interesting, and for me, it's like I started to read a lot of the High Republic stuff before. I kind of took a break to catch up on some of the other stuff, but it was interesting to see some of the characters like Venestra, who is a young girl in the beginning of the High Republic era, and now in the time of the Acolyte, she is definitely an adult. She's a Jedi Master and all that stuff. So, kind of interesting to see the different aspects of that. So,
yeah, definitely do that. Yeah. For myself, my watching has been and probably the least unhinged since I went to go see the Ghost concert movie right here, right now.
Okay.
It's very, very Iron Maiden. They did a recording of their live concert in LA, and then they wrote a movie into the behind the stages scenes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's very reminiscent of like the Eddie saga. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. In more unhinged news, started watching an anime on Netflix called Rising Impact, which is about a third grader who is a golf prodigy in a world where people have golf superpowers, and there is a special golf academy based on Arthurian legend. So it's the Camelot Academy. The main character, the third grader, is Sir Gawain. One of his early rivals is Lancelot. The school is organized by Merlin.
Okay, so I have to ask, after watching this, did you have anything that from your cosplay thing that you kind of went, oh, that'd be kind of interesting to do?
Not yet. We're only halfway through the first season. The first season came out early this year. We just scrolling through Netflix, bored. Found that like, well, this sounds absurd. So I put it on, and I immediately fell in love because it is ridiculous and stupid and cringy and all the best things. But yeah, I'm waiting to see a good cosplay character. What I will say, what is really interesting is when you actually get to the Camelot school for golf, they introduce other mythology, the characters based on mythology as well, from different mythologies. You get a Chinese golfer named Wan Liang, based off of Water Spirit Dragon. Petulisa, based off the Greek Titan. You had Reiser and Nebel, the German brothers who slew the dragon.
Okay.
So it was really it's a fun absurd that I appreciate.
Is it really far out there? Like really far out there, kind of fooly cooly out there?
No, it's just like what makes it even more kind of surreal when stuff happens. It presents itself very normal, very down down to earth, and then randomly someone hits a tee shot that shatters 3 trees, or someone uses a magic strain effect to pull off the perfect putt. It just popped out of nowhere in the middle of the episode. Like, wait, what?
All right.
Yeah. So, the fact that it is so down to earth and then random absurdities just peppered in there really makes it pop. A way that I appreciate. I wouldn't by any means say that it's necessarily a good anime, but I will say it's funny and worth a watch.
How many seasons are there? Just the
one so far. It came out last month. Or no, actually, it came out earlier this month. and then we're going to have a second season come out later this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, once you get through what's out, you can give us an update on,
Yeah, I'll let
your
everyone
fun-
know next week. Yeah. Reading Rise. I've just been reading the rule book for Daggerheart, the new tabletop role-playing game from Matt Mercer and Critical Role.
Okay.
Kind of a potential evolution or replacement for D&D 5th edition, since D&D is not really doing a 6th edition. They're doing their weird 5.5 type deal.
Okay.
But yeah, Daggerheart looked really interesting. And then playing wise, I just finished earlier this afternoon. I just finished the expedition for No Man's Sky. Every time they do a major update, they also do an expedition, which essentially is a month-long season that kind of gives you a guided or curated experience worth missions that take you along all the new points of content. And so I just finished the new expedition for all their new essentially survival and danger elements for the Adrift update.
Have you been following the new stuff with Lego for the Rebuild the Galaxy?
No.
It's Star Wars Special is going to show up on September 13th, I believe.
Okay.
And they've actually already announced there's 2 sets that have been shown. One of them is, I don't know if you read some of the older like the Rogue Squadron and stuff like that. Are you familiar with the term the Uglies?
Yes.
So there is a set. One of the sets is a set that comes with a TIE fighter and an X-Wing, and essentially they're compatible that you can pop the wings off and switch them and basically create your own Uglies from that. But the thing that's the most interesting is there is a dark Millennium Falcon, which is an all-black Millennium Falcon. And it comes with very unique minifigures. And there is some of them are from obscure things in the Star Wars comics. So there is an all-white Darth Vader, for example. Mm-hmm. And it comes from the Infinite comic line where Anakin survived and becomes good. So essentially the same costume, but he's all white. Okay. And on top of it, it's like you've got a Dark Rey in the set. You've got a Darth Jar Jar. So that's really weird concept, but it's kind of exciting. Just something that's that's different. So they always kind of one of the things that I've read is there's always a staple that has to be out there. So there's always got to be supposedly a version of the Millennium Falcon out there, a version of the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter. So it's just unique that this iteration they decided to change things up.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had the one from Solo, the white Millennium Falcon. So now they're doing the black Millennium Falcon. So
there you go. Nice. Yeah, I feel like that'd be something that we can even do an episode on, is building multiverses, because I feel like that is the rule of any good multiverse. Is every named item has to exist in every iteration, but it cannot be the same. You cannot have all the same attributes.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to see what else there was. I know there was a droid, but I think it was in the TIE Fighter and X-Wing set that it was like L3G0 or whatever. So it was the Lego minifigure, but there's, I don't know, it's different. Every once in a while, you get these specials that come out that they play around with. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll have to look it up afterward. Okay. So, like you said at the top of the show, we are talking about the impact of Romance Comics on the comics industry. So, as I've said before, neither of us have really worked in the genre. I actually have never written a single romance story. I've been done quite the opposite. Where, I mean, the closest thing I've done is I've done a cosmic existential horror where a guy fell in love with a dead space god. But
Oh, you mean similar to Thanos? Okay.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I don't really have even much experience really reading straight romance comics besides the stuff that they have inspired. Is your experience with that pretty much the same, David?
I have, from a background, I have nothing, because, my sister didn't read. Reading wasn't her thing.
Sure.
My mom never read any romance stuff or anything. She was more, into the classic books and stuff like that. Not a lot of the things. She had a very big, surprising, since I'm kind of the opposite. She had an extremely large suspension of disbelief.
Okay.
So a lot of that stuff she she couldn't get into, but I did, I'm sure that you did as well. Kind of research some of the stuff and found out some interesting things.
Yeah.
I saw some of the ties to the pulp books and all that. So I'm so from my standpoint, I don't have a lot of experience at all with that. But I know you have some stuff, so maybe what we'll do is, go over some stuff that you have and, maybe have something that we can interject. What I found interesting on the research was, some of the first ones that came out in 1947 was by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
The Young Romance book.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to talk to when we get into it. Yeah. But the fact that not only was it like one of those, but the fact that they're credited with starting the genre. Mm-hmm. They essentially had seen how well that teen books were doing, and they decided to both leave their superhero titles at the time and worked on put out Young Romance as their way of staying in work, essentially.
Yeah, it's from what I was reading, a lot of the, at the time it was a lot of people coming back from World War II, mm-hmm. and they were looking for different things. So a lot of the superhero stuff that was, in the 30s and all that stuff, in the early 40s, it was like, there was a shift in paradigm there. So you saw a lot of branching out, and you saw things like romance novels, westerns, things like that they were kind of, the people of the time were clamoring for, something different, something more, ground to earth. And the draw in it was more of like, a little bit of like, the kind of scandalous, ooh, so-and-so, and this, and so-and-so is that, I did see something that was mentioning, there was a book, it was similar to a what if type thing, but it was, Lois marries Bruce Wayne,
Yeah.
It's like an alternate, it doesn't fall into, standard canon, but it was like something over there that touched upon, the romance. And some of the things that I found that was interesting, as well as some of the titles would just switch.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I saw was with Fawcett, they basically went through a superhero book to issue 67, and then 68 switched over completely to romance.
Yeah.
And it was the information on it was because they were able to, there were certain things in place for new books with new titles that they had to get like certified or whatever to do shipping and stuff like that. So if they could change a title and keep an existing numbering thing, they kind of bypassed that. So there was a lot of little weird tricks and things that they were doing at the time that sounded interesting.
Yeah, that was the changing title thing was interesting because at the time everything was done on contract. Essentially, all of your stuff was, you already negotiated your printing, your distribution, your mailing, everything like that. And so when a book failed, instead of going through and renegotiating all that for a new title, what a lot of publishers would do is they would essentially then just create a subtitle or whatever, and then the next issue would flip it over, so it's still the same book, but now it's definitely not the same book, but legally speaking it's the same book. And that was actually something that was industry wide, so a lot of people who are like now like comic historians looking back on that saw that like they were able to pick up like trends that whenever the comics industry hits a weird spot, you start seeing a lot of weird maneuvering like that. I mean, it's kind of the same thing for every industry. If the money isn't exactly where you thought it's going to be, you're going to find ways to make the money appear. And I mean, like sidestepping a few like formalities. And so that was apparently practice at the time. But yeah, I think what's really interesting at this period is that it's almost something that, unless you are like a diehard comic historian, if you're just a casual comics enjoyer, or if you're just enjoying the superhero part of comics, this is almost like a period of time that got blipped from memory, because everyone remembers, the origins of Superman, Captain America, and then we just kind of bypass some of the weird things of the Golden Age and go straight to the Silver Age.
Mm-hmm.
Without really the fact that this was a decade, like it was the Golden Age of comics, like, and the staples of it were all teen books or romance books. Kind of like you had said, everyone is so almost numbed to the idea of superheroes, fighting crime and fascism and stuff like that, because that had just been people's lived experiences for the last 15 years. That now instead you have MLJ Comics with Archie, who's just a kid living his life, and some will they tension at moments, and that ends up blowing up on the news racks.
Well, I'm wondering if I could see, you had a lot of people at the time, involved in war. I could imagine that, after getting drafted and coming and fighting and finally coming home, probably the last thing you want to do is sit here and read a comic or something about fighting,
Yeah,
and all that stuff. And it was interesting that you were talking about, Archie and all that, because Archie was in place, and you saw things like that were kind of, barely scraping the thing, know. So you saw some popularity there, but then, it went full blown into, the some of the scandalous things, plus a lot of the fashion and a lot of that stuff kind of playing in, and it also was a big era that opened up a lot of the stuff to women, because a lot of the draw was from the male side with the superheroes and all that stuff. So you saw a pretty big shift at that point.
Yeah, one of the first answers to Archie was Marvel. I forgot who they were at the time, but they put up Patsy Walker. So being known for the more actiony side of things, as opposed to Detective Comics, which is more about like the thinking side of things. And then they immediately put out, no, this is now a female-led teen romance series, and that's our flagship series. And all this kind of then culminates in Joe Simon and Jack Kirby writing young romance in 1947, because when they're talking with their editors, they're like, hey, we should do this, but make it for adults. And then the entire industry just seems to follow suit immediately thereafter.
Well, they were a pretty big influence all across. I mean, they were leaders in the industry and stuff. So I can totally see that happening, just based off their influence alone. But I'm sure all the numbers and everything just it's like, hey, why aren't we doing this?
Yeah, I enjoy paying my bills.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. And I mean, like you said, like even at that time, even like just because of how at the forefront they were, they've always been considered thought leaders. They're not just someone who like we look back on, but like even at the time, they were kind of the industry standard. There's some speculation back and forth on whether or not the comics industry would have actually gone bankrupt at the time because of how badly sales had started dwindling. As far as I can tell, the consensus is that not really, but there definitely would have been almost like a mass culling of some of the smaller companies if it wasn't for these teen books and romance books immediately pulling back readership and getting numbers back up for a lot of companies. Which is it's always weird to think about how you'll have these really weird, unexpected like shakeups in the industry. So like if someone's getting into comics now, it's very likely the industry is not going to reflect the same taste as it does right now in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly that, kind of thinking about then also going from the Silver Age comics to then late 80s to mid 90s, and the fact that we had to have the anti-hero surge to revive comics at that point as well.
And pockets, lots of pouches and pockets.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where you almost have like these. I mean, anti-hero kind of made a little more sense than going straight from Captain America punching Hitler to teenage romance. But it's one of those things where if you are working in comics or want to get into comics or any creative field even, taste is going to change frequently, and it's going to be sometimes it's going to be very out of left field.
Mm-hmm. Well, also have to think about it. The time that these romance things, these were right after the war, and you think about it. Who's your big demographic for superhero comics? It's going to be younger males, right? Well, where were most of the younger males?
Yeah.
They were out, on the front lines. So, a lot of your readership's there. So, that definitely does make sense that, that it did hit as big of an impact, and, very struggling time at that time. So,
yeah. Totally. And it's continued on for some time to the point where was this statistic? We have a stat here from the University of South Carolina. You probably got the same paper. But yeah, by 1950, 1 in 5 of all comic books were romance comics, with 150 titles on the market, sold by over 20 publishers. Which is, I mean, it's almost absurd to think about 20 publishers now, considering that, like, if you walk into a comic store, you're lucky if you see more than 5. But just having that, kind of where we are now, where if you walk into a comic store, like 1 in 5 comics might be a team title, right? Like a team up title, or like a crossover event or whatever. At that point, it's like, with as frequently as you would see those things, you said you're seeing romance novels on news racks and bookstores. So it was definitely that's kind of where, even with the hyperbole of romance comics didn't really save the state of the comics industry, they were definitely the driving point of income for comics for a while. They were one of the major, like, economic factors into how the industry got shaped coming out of the 40s and 50s and going into the 60s before we get into, like, the Silver Age of comics. However, we did have a moment in the mid-50s where we ended up going through what was called I believe someone called it the romance glut, where, as the comics industry is wont to do at random times, sales will just stop on a dime and the industry implodes. Romance comics were not immune to this. And usually it happens when publishers get a little too greedy, start pushing out 50 different titles of the same thing, and then with 50 different variant covers. And that's when they started pivoting back towards superheroes. And of course, this is mid to end of Korea, gearing up for Vietnam. So again, we get back into that same almost like wartime mindset of we need something motivational to go out and punch people with.
One of the things that I saw I found was kind of interesting was during the boom of these. I was trying to find it in the thing, so I just found the information on it. But with the romance comics, there was a couple of things that came out. There was a book that was the first issue of Teenage Romances in 1949. Featured the work by two pioneering artists, Lily Renee and Matt Baker. Mm-hmm. Baker is the first known Black artist to work in the comic book industry, and Renee was one of the first female artists. So thought that was kind of cool, that it kind of opened up opportunities for diversity, and those are some of our very early cases of diversity in comics. I think is pretty cool.
Yeah,
so.
I think I think unfortunately, in order for indie industry to really progress, you almost need to have those shake-up moments where they're at the point where they're desperate for new ideas. And either they have people that wouldn't normally be given the time of day when it's things as normal are now kind of allowed to work on stuff that they don't think is going to do well, and then it does well. Or they're just kind of grab everyone they can in the room and sit them in front of the bullpen I think, yeah. I mean, the history of the comics industry and being inclusive is not all that great at times. But yeah, one of the things that was really interesting about this was the sudden inclusion of people that wouldn't necessarily be given that time of day. There was a whole I'm not going to say the name of it, but there was a whole they did a I'll say the new one, the one that Marvel ran, called "But He's the Boy I Love," which was an interracial romance comic, which was one of the first ones to feature since a word I cannot say, romance, written by Fawcett in 1950. And I kind of lost it, but yeah. Now it is weird how, and it's something that I think is changing for the better, but it is weird how at those times you need to have those big shake-up moments in order to actually get different voices in the industry, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a lot of the stuff that we do or we see come out of things that people are kind of, we'll see how it runs. It's a throwaway thing.
Yeah.
It's you think about things like Larry Hama, taking up the G.I. Joe stuff, and you see Bob Budinsky taking up the Transformer stuff. It's like, we'll run with it. It seems like it's cool, but nobody really wants to do it, and let's see what we do. And then next thing you know, it's like boom, it's blown up. So a lot of things, there's a lot of opportunities that people run into that, like you said, it may be a case of, we'll take a chance. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But then you have some moments where, you get a lot of, you get something big that comes out of it.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. I think also, kind of something that, like, when you talk about something big came out of all this, there's a couple of different things that, like, we can talk about. Like, not only is, like, the immediate economic impact of romance comics dominating sales for a little over a decade, but then even after they fall out of fashion, you still have a lot of the visual style for comics then going into the Silver Age was defined during the golden age of romance comics. The color grading and the types of line work, as well as we kind of go into that. We now notice a lot more romance subplots or genre crossovers kind of going forward, where now every superhero has some sort of love interest that is getting much more time on page than it would have beforehand.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And kind of one of the things that gets attributed to this is a title we talked about earlier, is the "What if Lois Lane married Bruce Wayne?" What if Lois Lane married Bruce Wayne? I was expecting that to rhyme, but that
it wasn't. It was a what if type story,
yeah.
But back in the time, it wasn't a what if. It was
just
Lois marries Bruce Wayne. You know,
Yeah.
that whole kind of hook. What?
Yeah, but that type of speculative storyline, were kind of, you started noticing more of those type of things, either like on their own, or where characters were then given a character to then present as a potential love interest. Kind of at the kickstart of the Silver Age, because we had just spent so much time focused on romance and comics.
Do you think that's carried over into where you see some of the more dominant female characters in your Catwoman, your Black
Yeah.
Cat, your Mary Jane? Hey, you've hit the jackpot. It's
Mhm.
this. A lot of that is kind of a legacy from that.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and also like even I think Brazil opened the room also for a lot of female characters, but also to kind of that point earlier, we were talking about uh, the inclusion of the first African American work on a comic. I think then also because of the romance boom is the whole reason we were able to get titles like Power Man or uh, Luke Cage, Blue Marvel, that kind of thing, because of sort of the doors that opened up in that romance era.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's all the bullet points I had. It's more of like a history lesson episode talking about like, and I guess now we can move into our speculation period. But I guess
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, it's like, it went into this, but, another popular, kind of at the same time, a little prior is you saw a lot of the romance pulps and things. And you
Yeah.
saw a lot of the, like you saw the Western pulps and things like that. So I think it was, a natural progression where you took the aspect of the little mini novels that you were reading and expanding them out into full comic form and all that. So it was interesting to see the see how some of the progression went on that.
Definitely. Yeah. I think we're kind of the whole period is like this really weird thing of like unexpected sudden growth, kind of branching off in a bunch of different directions that no one had really like seen coming. I mean, that's kind of hard to imagine, but we talked about this a couple times with Joe Simon and Jack Kirby leaving superheroes for a little bit to focus on romance.
Well, here's something that kind of, I think, here's a what if scenario. What if Captain America was a romance novel?
Right. I mean, yeah, because I mean, that's also like one of the weird things is I love to see Cap as romance, but you definitely see now where even now you definitely have comics where like the entire arc is much more romance focused. It's more like the interpersonal relationship, or it's all about Cap and Peggy, right? Whereas certainly like themes like that existed, but for the most part before this, the main thing Cap was focused on was punching Nazis. So in a weird way, like, but now when you think about it, it's hard to imagine Cap without Peggy or Spider-Man without Mary Jane. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely an influence that stayed. The whole genre hit quick and hard, and then fizzed out early 70s and all this. But the influences of it are still widely seen. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for you, kind of going from our place of no real experience with this genre before, what were kind of some of your like key thoughts and takeaways just studying for this tonight?
I learned I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but I learned a lot of things that I didn't know. A lot of the key players, and a lot of the drive behind, what the marketing was and what the influence was. So yeah, I found it interesting. Is it still my cup of tea? Would I go out and go, oh my God, I need to go read a
Right.
romance comic? No, probably not. I'm still more of a traditional sci-fi, but I do see a lot of I see a lot of references, and if I turn around and I say, all right, well, something like that transferring into now with the things like the X-Men wedding special that just came in, kind of a little bit on that. It's just now you're taking a lot of that and diversifying it with a lot of the modern day, a lot of the modern day beliefs and feelings, and I think that's I can totally see the influence on that long term.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I mean, kind of similar for me. The genres, for me, it's like Wuthering Heights. I can absolutely appreciate like one of the greatest like pieces of fiction ever written. Influential, important, like great piece of work. I'm not reading that with a 10-foot pole. One of those things where it's we got over this a little bit when I did my college courses on publishing, and then also like going over specifically comics writing and talking about like how the publishing business works. And like this event in particular is always kind of a weird thing that comics professors and like publishing professors always want to hit on, because it is such an example of you never know where the next big boom is going to come from. And so I knew a little bit of it, but I definitely had to pick up some of the more fine details, like specific dates and like stats for tonight. And like the sheer market volume of romance comics is insane to me. I mean, obviously, like we sell more comics now than we did back then, but just as a ratio, like a percentage wise, this would be like if romance comics were beating out superhero teams or things like that.
Well, they essentially were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you had Shift. I was just surprised in my research that there was such a shift that that they would just cut off. These are done. We're switching over. We're just keeping the numbering, but we're just switching over and we're retiring those and going. And that it hits so hard so quickly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of like this weird things where also it don't really. Not all of the like places I found like really talk about this, but I'd be interested to also see like from the perspective of, I mean, hobbyist comic shops weren't necessarily a thing, but if you're in charge of ordering for a news rack or a local bookstore, and all of a sudden you're like, this is a different number. This is.
you go, yeah, I just ordered the Captain America 57, and it's like, wait a minute, this isn't Captain America, but it is 57.
Yeah.
Or whatever, or whatever the title was. It was like, wow. And you also got to kind of think about the time where probably a lot of the newsstands had a lot of more of the traditional values or a way of thinking. I don't necessarily mean values, but I imagine that must have been a pretty big hurdle for the newsstands and all that, where you've been buying comics to put out on your rack for for 1 to 2 decades, and you do realize hey, that your numbers are going down, because that's pretty much transparent there. But then to come and say, in a particular time, and a lot of the mindset in that time, that it must have been a pretty big shock and a big gamble for the newsstands to go, what's this thing will never sell, or I can't see this thing selling, and then boom, it does. But that must have been a big shock for a lot of the retailers, to put those numbers down, and and put a lot of faith in this is the direction it's going. To have it pay off is good, but I imagine there was some shaky times at that point for them.
Definitely. I mean, it's one of those things where like even like, I mean, one of the critiques now from like historians looking back is that a lot of the like romance comics are still fit into some possibly like misogynistic pitfalls of the woman existing only to get married. But looking at the lens of this is 1950, for them to comic stand like, why is this comic page only pretty women? It was definitely like a wild like change and step forward for the time. That like like you said, it's gotta be one of those things where like if you like own and run a small business like newsstand, you gotta be like really questioning if you're going to keep that contract going when you first open that box.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure that probably by that time, with a lot of the declined sales, that a lot of them were probably
just
welcoming just anything to do a turnaround and all that. So
yeah. And then the demographic then immediately changes for these people now. All of a sudden, like it's young women going in and buying comics, or even younger men than usual going in to buy Archie, things like that, where you're essentially like a staple product that you got. It's still the same product. It's just the theming has changed, and the entire market then has changed around that theming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's and then other things happened. There was more so in our vein, but we had the because of all this late 70s to 80s, we had the gothic romance, gothic horror revival that was inspired by a lot of the writers of the romance era that led to the creation of things such as World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade. So I added to more of a staple here at the channel. No. I guess that's all the bullet points I had for tonight. It's definitely a weird thing that is, if you're interested in the business of comics, it's definitely worth looking into, especially if you have an interest in marketing or understanding market trends. Which, I mean, surprise, the first thing you learn is that you can't anticipate market trends, that they happen and you have to ride the wave. But I mean, and also just a good listen to have that, if Jack Kirby can step away from superheroes to write and illustrate romance comics, if your idea isn't working, try something new. Who knows? You might find success with it.
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of a different thing with a lot of these books, because I'm not the one penciling them, I'm not the one inking them, so I'm kind of following the trends on that. But for you as a writer, if you kind of put yourself back, in that time frame, how do you think you would do jumping on some of the current trends at the time. Not specific, not just romance, but if you got thrust into Western and romance and some of the other things, how do you think that may affect your thought process on that? Or you think you would do pretty well to flip that switch, or would it be a little more difficult for you?
I think it depends. If I was there for the spark, the spike in anti-heroes or horror, I would probably be able to easily jump on those easily enough, because I already want to include things that are more themed that way naturally. But I think romance and horror and westerns, I think that'd be a tough time for me. You'd probably be able to figure it out, but it may come off because it's always things like I can appreciate a good western and I can appreciate a good romance, but if there's space in there to write a dark romance, right? Something a little more like
you throw a little underworld type.
Not even that, but just having maybe she falls for a greaser who's in with a tough crowd, and it leads to some intense night drives. That's something I could lead them more a little into, but I think honestly it'd probably be a tough time for me. Even my favorite western is a Lovecraftian horror. The Golgotha series. That's a great book trilogy. Imagine Cthulhu invades a Nevada gold rush town.
Yeah. No, I just I was kind of thinking, what if you're thinking along the lines of, say you got tasked with something like, you're doing your Wolf Hunter book, but you had to kind of throw that either a Western spin or bring a much heavier romance element into it. Just curious as to how. Sorry, not meaning putting you on the spot. I was just curious. So
Yeah, this is kind of like a weird thing to it'd be weird to the point, because this is a weird thing to talk about because it doesn't really come up in the book. But I always if I'm writing a character, I always pencil out what I think their orientation is going to be, and for me, it just made sense for James Willard to be kind of an aromantic, asexual kind of guy. Mm-hmm. His sexuality is Britain.
There you go.
So I don't know what his romantic leaning would be. But yeah, I feel like that was something where I could probably find a way to put it in easily enough, because then I just pull on some James Bond inspiration, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but if I was doing something like that with the other two books I have in the pipeline one of them does have romantic themes, and the other one has some romantic leanings. So I think that Wolf Hunter probably the hardest one.
Okay. Yeah, I that's a specific theme. You got a very defined theme, and a time frame and all that stuff. I was just thinking about, if you had not necessarily taking, Wolf Hunter and making it that, but it's a character kind of a similar type character, maybe it's a double a double crossover. Maybe it is a Western romance type thing, or something like that. So it's just it's just interesting, No need to comment on that on that other part from here on, because I got a good gist of it. I just was curious on how you may approach that or something, but I think we're good.
Yeah.
Hello to everybody. I know Tim's
Yes.
popped it up on screen. Hello Chris. Hello Matthew, and Dustin. It's going as well as can be with a subject that neither Tim nor I are experts on, but we did some research and we were looking into it and found some things that we didn't know. And I think always learning something and getting new information helps you grow. So definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah, I well, speaking of things that I am an expert on, I just got a message from our dungeon master in the game we're playing on. He's allowing us to take feats at level 2. So
Nice.
yeah, my gnome wizard now has an intelligence of 20.
Cool.
Yeah. It's it is interesting always learning about things that make such a long felt impact that don't necessarily match up with your preconception of the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that stuff has affected the work that I'm doing without me even really thinking about it. I think I kind of announced this since we have artwork for it, but one of the books I'm working on is our adaptation of Dracula, and getting artwork back that is inspired by that same kind of era of comics, and then also my understanding of how to put in the relationships as they're presented by the book, but now present them on a comic. You already have examples of how you put those developments and relationships on panel by panel. So it is something to. It's weird to think about how that domino in history falls.
Do you think that what you learned today may tweak you to one side or another, or is it just I'm pretty good as I am? I'm just
And those ones where I don't know if I necessarily have the urge to write a romance comic, but if I did, I know there's a proof case for it.
No, I don't mean specifically going right a romance comic. I mean, is it something that maybe learning this stuff, maybe as you go through, maybe you might pull a little more into what you're.
Yeah, I have to see that over the case for. I think also why this is going to be kind of more of an overall MFA type thought, but the idea of the evolution of art, the idea that the reason why genres keep on changing so much is because not only do they reflect the current taste of the society that they're created in, that's a reason why stories being told on TV and movies now are different than they were 10 years ago, is because the taste of society has changed. Mm-hmm. But that also, even though they don't necessarily feel like it at the moment, looking back through the lens of history, they are generally getting better because they're always finding ways to trim fat or to better develop elements of that story. And because you're being raised and trained on the experts of the previous generation. It's the same reason in sports. You're always trained by, the fastest runner today trained by the fastest runner of yesterday is always going to be better than that fastest runner of yesterday because their starting threshold is higher. So this is the most MFA hat up my own butt I've been in a while. But when you're creative now, you're trained on the best creatives that were like 10, 20 years prior to you, like even if not directly, then indirectly, because you probably took in their influence, because obviously, I want to read the best writing. You probably want to see what's considered the best coloring, and you take your notes from that and move on and continue. And so the thought there is that what the Romance there era then allowed us to do is find a way to better develop relationships, interpersonal relationships in comics as a medium. Then that is why they affected all comics going forward, is because they were set the standard for developing those interpersonal relationships. And then creatives from that point then realized that this is a good element to have that we need to keep, and we need to trim fat around that. And then they got put into superheroes and the other main staples of what is considered a good in a comic. So all that to say, I think for me, then kind of what the lesson here, kind of thinking critically about the whole thing, is that one of the things that I can do to be better in my comic creation is to learn those lessons and have better defined interpersonal relationships and romantic relationships, because there's clearly something there that resonates with the reader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely, that way it's not just a kick, punch, kick, punch, it's not the Konami code,
Yes.
tap.
Exactly. That's evolution of fighting games, Street Fighter, and things like that. Contra, no real story, just go across the screen and commit bits of violence in 8 or 16-bit. And then come all the way now to today, and the most successful Konami franchise is 95% cutscene. If you're watching Metal Gear Solid, and a lot of that has to deal with romantic bits and more thoughtful like interactions, intelligence. Guilty Gear, the Strive, what is considered to be like one of the greatest fighting games ever made right now. Its story mode is literally just a 3-hour movie. There's no gameplay in the story mode. It's just a 3-hour or a season of an anime, essentially. And then the online multiplayer and the arcade mode is just gameplay, but refined to such a point because they don't make exceptions for, this has to make sense within the story mode. Like these character mechanics need to make sense in the story mode, and that affects the other elements about it. Like, no, our story mode is just a TV show. The rest of the game then gets handled separately. So you end up getting like this really well-defined story and really then well-defined element there. So it's interesting to see that change, like that evolution, even like in something like a video game where it's no longer just like inputs causing violence. Like there is so much more thought process into the whole thing.
Well, come on, you always wanted to finish the game with your Street Fighter character to find their little story at the end.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's definitely. I'm always a big fan of everything that you learn helps define who you are, and it bring a little bit, maybe it influences and brings out what you're expressing and what you're putting out there. So it makes you more round. I think it makes you more rounded, and therefore whatever you put out is a little more, or tends to be a little more rounded. So
absolutely, yeah, I agree with that. It's everything is the kind of a pastiche of what we've taken before. And while I may not, go back and read Young Romance by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, I may take some of the lessons that I've learned from my partner making me sit down and watch Bridgerton. Put some of those elements into a relationship and a comic going forward.
Nice. Very cool.
Okay. Did you have any other thoughts on the subject for tonight?
No, nothing else on the subject.
Okay.
I just, as I mentioned before we went on air, I really enjoyed being on the stream with Matt Wagner.
Yeah.
I you know me, I'm always praising the Mage and Grendel stuff, but one of the things that I have to give Matt Wagner is he was always willing to throw stuff out there. He took his Grendel character, for example, and went every which way. It wasn't it wasn't a oh, this is 100 rows and the story's done and the character's done or anything. He opened it up to a lot of people's interpretation, and when you jump back and forth on his different books that he did, not just with his independent stuff, but there was a lot of different aspects and in my view a lot of different thinking. So it was really cool to be on with him and see some of the stuff. And I know that he's currently also working on a Dracula project with Kelly Jones.
Yeah.
That they've released the first volume, and they're gonna have a second one coming out. So it'll be interesting to see his version, and then once you get yours out there, see your version. So definitely looking forward to both of those. So
yeah, that'll be good. I think also James Tynion also put out a Dracula.
Well, there's that whole there's that Universal Monsters books. They're currently on Frankenstein, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they've finished up the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or if that's still going on. So there's kind of a bit of a rise there. So we slipped away from Universal and went with Bram Stoker's telling. I wanted to lean into the other Bram Stoker's Dracula and have Gary Oldman and Keanu Reeves in there, but this is we're sticking very close to the book and taking elements from the different presentations doesn't make sense, but this is probably going to be it's weird to think about, but the original Dracula was a continent crossing, trailblazing story. There's a lot of back and forth all over Europe with it, so it wasn't just in Transylvania or just in London like the Universal one was. So it'll be interesting because we have a lot of chase sequences and things like that. That'll be fun. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I imagine that our Silverliners, our Silverline viewers, will be interested as well. So, good job.
Yeah,
looking forward.
Yeah. All right. And what are you currently working on that people can look forward to? If you're doing that.
I'm still working on the finishing up the Demon Tales coloring. So.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
Yep. All
right. Well, we will be back next week to talk about making mystery comics. So we're going to talk about mystery and suspense and all that good stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on the other streams. I don't know if you've seen that.
Those streams are getting their schedules filled. I already got ours filled, so we're set for the month.
Okay, there you go.
But so we'll be back at 8 p.m. Pacific next week. Make sure to check out Wednesday Wham and Silver Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on those respective days. We don't know what their subjects are yet, but it's sure to be a good time.
We also have the new Diamond catalog just came out.
Yes.
So the book in there is Kalis. So it's on Kalis, and then next month we'll go back to Trump's. So keep your eye on that. Talk to your retail outlet and see if they've got extra copies coming in, or order. Try and get one, and give it a shot.
Absolutely. Well, We will be back next week. But until that time, make mine
Make mine Silverline. Thanks.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.